Yo, what is up guys, and welcome back to McAdie's Entertainment. I'm your host as always, Adam McGahee, coming back at you guys with another Marvel Zombies-ish video. You know, if you squint your eyes a bit, it's Marvel Zombies, a Marvel comic that identifies as Marvel Zombies, if you will. The comic, of course, is Marvel's Undeadpool, which takes place during the X-Men Age of Revelation storyline. In this, Deadpool gets infected with a disease called the X-Virus, turning him into a zombie-like creature who eats his fellow mutants. For anyone subscribed to the channel, you may have noticed that we are covering this series issue by issue. It's now done, and as always, I've edited each story into one cinematic movie for you guys to enjoy. Before we hop into that though, I wanted to remind you guys that McAdie's Entertainment is now officially partnered with Marvel Comics. To be more specific, I am partnered with their Marvel Unlimited program, which is basically like Netflix, but for Marvel Comics. It has thousands of Marvel titles ranging from the oldest to some of the newest in their library, all in one convenient place that you can read right on your phone. I've been using this for years now for video research, and even back when I was in college just for fun, and it's high-key the best streaming app on the market. They even have these really cool exclusive Infinity comics, which are made just for the app in this really cool format for phones. So instead of doom scrolling social media, you can do some Dr. Doom scrolling and fuel your brain with some comic learning instead. If you use my link below, you can start your 7-day free trial. After that, plans start as low as $10 a month. Also wanted to give another huge shout out to my good homies and friends of the show, the Country Hicks. If you're a fan of country and rap, these guys are like the peanut butter and chocolate of both. They're what Will Smith thought he was in Wild Wild West. I actually partnered with them for their latest song, Ghost Town, which definitely has some sweet Punisher and Ghost Rider vibes to it. Be sure to give them a follow and a listen, and tell them that McAdie sent you. With that out of the way, let's get on with what you came here for, and that is the full gory story of Marvel's Undeadpool. The story begins in the decimated ruins of Louisville, Kentucky. Here we see a group of young superheroes pushing a rundown van to a nearby shop. The mechanic notes that they rode this vehicle pretty hard, where they remarked they were driving for 9 hours straight and had places to be. We'd see the mechanic was a mutated gray-skinned woman with 2 heads, who asked this Netflix-looking group of youths just who they were supposed to be, where they introduced themselves as the Alpha Warriors, which is supposed to be an homage to Alpha Flight and the New Warriors. Although I doubt anyone under 30 knows who either of those groups are. That's an Easter egg for myself and my fellow Unk comic book readers. The woman then informs these heroes that their car was in pretty rough shape and that the part they needed was going to come all the way from Mexico and would take nearly a week to arrive. The Ozempic Thor-looking dude of the group then said that they didn't have that kind of time and would walk where they needed to be. As the heroes made their way into the darkness, the mechanic then warned them to be careful, for even they didn't know what was out there. Coming across a wooded area filled with apple trees, the gang then soon discovered just why the mechanic was warning them, where they were attacked by a group of zombie-like monsters, which they dubbed as Babbles. Getting into formation, the youths would then go to war with the monsters, where we discover a bit more about them and what they could do. The Thor of the group was a man called Magni, who even had a similar power set to Odinson, but in my opinion, had some really lame looking skull face paint. Next, we'd have a woman with powers very similar to Reed Richards, who was dubbed Fantastica. Then we'd have the coolest and simultaneously lamest member of the group called Kid Man-Thing, who was like Man-Thing except he was a kid, I guess? Even though right here he looks about to be 35 years old with a mortgage. Oh, and his name is Marvin. I love this character. Finally, we'd have Fearless, who clearly modeled her outfit after Daredevil, except her powers were a bit different. She didn't have the martial arts training that Matthew did, and instead had some levels of telepathy, which were essentially useless against undead zombies, where she soon found herself overrun. She would have been zombie chow if it weren't for the quick-acting Kid Man-Thing, who saved her just in the nick of time. Shout out to the GOAT. The Alpha Warriors would be victorious, as the Babbles soon fled the scene. Here we'd see Marvin and Fantastica were a couple. They'd embrace after the fight and congratulate their other members. Magni would tell them that it would be only 5 more days and they would be out of Revelation's grasp forever, along with the rest of Midgard. As they continued their journey, the heroes were unaware of another threat, a far deadlier one, watching their every move. This would be revealed as Deadpool, who was our narrator for this tale all along. Except, not all was right with Wade. Here Wilson would stumble out of the trees. Well, what was left of him anyway. Mumbling, foaming at the mouth, and covered in bruises and sores, Deadpool was infected with something. His mind was very much the mercenary that we all know and love. But his body, well, that was a whole other story. As the Alpha Warriors would tour an abandoned summer camp, we'd get a bit more from Deadpool on just what was going on. He was infected with something called the X-Virus. Most people it would kill right away, others it would turn them into superpowered mutants. Hence where we got our group of college diversity flyer Avengers from. While, yeah, you'd think Deadpool's healing factor would normally protect him from a virus like this, whatever this disease was, when mixed with his healing factor, turned into something bad. Like mixing Skittles and M&M's bad. Later that night, the Alpha Warriors would be gathered near a fire talking about the intricacies of Fearless's powers. More specifically, her blindness, and if she could see blackness, where she noted that she was not even sure what black could look like. She said that she could see in a way though, like the warmth of the fire, the way it's earned with the work of gathering wood, the way it brings them together. She didn't see what things looked like. She saw them for what they were. Kid Man-Thing would offer Magni some fruit, where the man refused, saying he would find his own dinner. He needed some protein, and would go on the hunt for some animals. Fantastica thought this sounded fun and asked if she could tag along, where he told her that someone should stay with Fearless. Marvin, being the chill guy he was, opted to stay with Fearless while they went out and hunted. Fantastica would give her mans a kiss, where he wished them good luck. However, we discover that these two were hunting for a whole different kind of meat, as they immediately started making out with each other as soon as they got far away enough in the woods. Before the pair could get too hot and bothered, Magni was suddenly shot right in the mouth with an arrow, where he collapsed to the ground. A horrified Fantastica would manage to flee, right as the infected Deadpool would leap down upon the man, where he'd slice into him and begin to feed on his flesh. Fantastica would sprint through the forest, where she would thankfully locate Fearless. With tears in her eyes, she would tell her friend about what happened. Kid Man-Thing would go to the location, where he'd look on in terror at Magni's nearly zombified corpse that was robbed of all of its nutrients. The remaining Alpha Warriors would then continue their journey, completely shaken over what they had just witnessed. Marvin, though, was troubled by something else. He sensed something was off about his girlfriend and Magni. He turned to Fantastica and asked just what they were doing in the woods. Was she cheating on him? Fantastica, knowing she was guilty of course, then tried to gaslight the poor guy, saying that their friend was dead and there was no time for this high school drama. Being no fool, Marvin would then demand for her to tell him the truth. Fantastica would then break down in tears and would admit what happened. Yeah, they did some stuff. Sometimes. She then tried to throw the blame to Marvin, saying that she wanted more from him and from, well, everything, Honestly, this young adult Netflix drama is getting pretty good. Michael Jackson, can you pass the popcorn, please? Heartbroken, Kid would then turn to Fearless and ask if she knew about this all along. After all, she could use her powers to tell if people were lying. Reluctantly, the woman would confess. Seeing that he was truly nothing more than the joke of the group, Kid Man-Thing decided the heck with this and left the pair to their own devices. Fantastica would plead with him to come back, all with a surprisingly silent zombie Deadpool watching the drama unfold from a distance. Eventually, Marvin would reach an abandoned junkyard. He'd make his way through, where, sadly, it would become his final resting place, for as Fantastica and Fearless finally reached him, they would locate his half-eaten corpse hanging from one of the mechanical cranes. Another victim of this Deadpool's hunger. Later that night, Fearless and Fantastica had set up camp in the scrapyard. Sensing their impending doom, Fearless told her friend that they weren't making out of this alive. Trying to remain somewhat optimistic, Fantastica would then ask her friend just why would they have survived what they have already. Considering how far they've made it, they were destined to become one of the good guys. That's pretty big talk coming from the girl who cheated on my boy Kid Man-Thing. R.I.P. Marvin. However, any potential hope Fearless may have had left was immediately shattered, where Fantastica would suddenly vanish right alongside her. Hoping that this was some kind of joke, a panicked Fearless would ask her friend just where she went. As the fear would settle in, Fearless would race to the scrapyard and would be brought to the point of tears, where she would tell Fantastica that she could no longer read her mind. Little did the poor blind girl know that just above her, the zombified Deadpool had already taken her ally and was dining on her stretchy flesh. Preparing for a fearless feast, Wade would then leap down and race after the girl, where she would attempt to flee. As the pair would fight, we'd be taken inside the captive Deadpool's mind once more. After all, he was merely a prisoner forced to watch his infected body do these heinous things. He had always wanted to be a mutant like Wolverine, Cyclops, or Cable, able to overcome these huge obstacles that came their way, simply because this was the type of men they were. Way back when he was still a human and found out he was dying from cancer, all Wade Wilson had wanted to do was become a mutant. But never did he think he would become one like this, a monster. Just before he could dine, Wade noticed a sudden change within his body. He could talk? He would then immediately try to put Fearless at ease, where he would swear to her that he was no longer infected. Not exactly sure himself just what was going on, Deadpool surmised that perhaps he had eaten enough people to get his body back to some kind of normalcy. Regardless, no matter what was happening, what was important was that for the first time in forever, Deadpool was once more in control. He knew Fearless wanted to get to St. Louis with the other mutant survivors. He would help her. He would protect her. It was the least he could do to atone for the awful things he had done. To prove he was no longer a threat, he asked Fearless to use her powers on him and read his mind to prove he was being truthful. Rather horrified and confused, Fearless would oblige the mercenary's request, where, much to her surprise, she would see that Wade was indeed telling the truth. He was cured. Seeing that they were all that was left, Deadpool told Fearless they would need to move fast while their chances were good. Little did he know, though, they were being watched. We would then see this observer in a highly futuristic computerized room. He had detailed records of both Wade and Fearless. He noted that this young woman's powers could be an invaluable asset in this fight, and she needed a much better protector than this mentally and physically unstable Deadpool. We would see this man would be revealed as Cable. He journeyed out to the wasteland, saying that Fearless needed to be a part of X-Force, and he was ready for war. The next issue opens where we see the mutant Fearless running through an abandoned mansion. She suddenly feels a hand grab her from behind. However, this was not a specter out to get her. This was Deadpool merely trying to save his new blind best friend from falling down a giant pit of death. Despite her blindness, Fearless did have heightened senses similar to Daredevil. She would tell Wade that she heard someone outside. Deadpool would be one step ahead and told the girl that it was merely some babble zombies outside. We discover that they speak in gibberish like this because the mutant revelation had taken their ability to talk after they spoke against him, thus reverting them to mindless creatures. As they make their way to the basement, Deadpool believes he had gained Fearless's trust, and it wasn't just because of his down-home country appeal. Her psychic powers could be used to tell if someone was lying or not. One thing was for certain, Wade was not lying about dedicating his life to keeping this young woman safe and getting her to the X-Men. The remaining team members were in St. Louis, and he was going to do all he could to get her there. I mean, after all, it was the least he could do after eating her friends, after getting infected with the Revelation zombie virus. Making their way through the creepy basement, Deadpool came across something that completely shocked him. And that was a poster for the Santa Claus theme park in Indiana. Noting that they were on a time crunch, Wade then asked Fearless what was the point of traveling across Midwestern America if they could not enjoy the finer things in life like this. So yeah, I just looked this up, and yeah, it's based off a real place in Indiana. 'Tis the season, boys. Group trip time to Santa Claus Park? Arriving to the park, Deadpool was thrilled to see that it looked just like the flyer, but was sadly heartbroken to see that it was closed. Knowing that Fearless was still just a kid after all and had been on the run for weeks, Wade wanted her to slow down and have fun for once. Running off into the park, he told her that he would be right back. After some time, Fearless would then ask the guy just where he went. He'd then tell her to step forward, where she would trip into a comically huge pile of stuffed animals that would make her laugh for the first time in what felt like forever. After a fun-filled day of theme park hijinks, the pair would then enjoy a nice healthy dinner of roasted sponge cakes over a fire. As they ate, Fearless would then ask Wade an important question. Just why did he stop killing when it came to her? Wade would then tell her that it was just the way his healing factor interacted with the X-virus that he was infected with. He surmised that he had enough protein, and his body went from pure instinct to giving his brain back control. It was truly nothing all that special. Fearless would then tell him that the "nothing special" line was rather ironic, as that is what her and her former Alpha team members saw themselves as. When they were just kids, they were placed in some kind of testing center where they were examined for secondary mutations, all under the hope of becoming the next X-Men. They all thought they would be something upon graduation. However, their dreams didn't exactly come true. They were soon deemed inflexible by the regime. What this meant was they were too moral for revelation. They were seen as too rebellious, too heroic. Heartbroken, the youth then somehow came across files upon files of the heroes who had come before them. Groups like the Defenders, the Fantastic Four, and the New Warriors. People they were supposed to forget, who had used their powers for good. However, due to revelation, they were now long gone. Inspired by this past generation, They created their own costumes and ventured out to help those in need without Revelation's approval. This would cause them to suffer this god's wrath, where he sent out his own group of creepy youths after them called the Omega Kids. Knowing they could be killed at any time, the new warriors fled in search of the remnants of the real X-Men, all in the hopes they would be able to team up and stop Revelation once and for all. Of course, now Fearless was all that was left of this team after our boy Zombie Deadpool got a little hungry and kinda ate them all. Completely justified though, man. Sad story origins aside, these guys, they were kinda awful. Rather enjoying their trauma dump bonding session, Deadpool and Fearless were then rudely interrupted by Cable. He had finally tracked them down and was ready to take Fearless in. Barely giving the mercenary time to speak, Cable told Deadpool to shut up, where he then blasted him with a powerful wave of energy, hurtling him from the camping site. Fearless would then ask just what Cable did to Wade, where he then told her that there was a war coming for the future and he was giving her a chance to survive. Preparing to transport, Cable this time was rudely interrupted when Deadpool tossed one of the roasted sponge cakes right in his face. Wilson then told his old buddy to back off. After all, he had promised to get this girl to St. Louis, a promise he was determined to keep. She didn't need old mercenaries like them. She needed the X-Men. However, there was no coercing Cable. He told Deadpool that the era of the New Mutants was over and the era of X-Force was just beginning. Seeing that this method wasn't working, Wade then told Fearless to hide, for he and Daddy Cable needed to have a little chat. This chat, of course, being an awesome one-on-one brutal fight. I mean, can Cable and Deadpool exist for more than 5 minutes without fighting? It's just a canon event at this point, guys. During the duel, Deadpool would still try to reason with the guy, where he aptly responded by snapping his arm right in half. While normally this wouldn't be a problem for Deadpool's healing factor, let's not forget he was still infected with the Revelation virus. As his arm would go to repair itself, the disease would overtake his body once more, where he'd instinctively go to feed on Cable's mutant flesh. Immediately after doing this, Wade would gain control of his mind once more, where he would apologize for doing this to Cable's good arm and that he was back in the driver's seat. Luckily though, Cable's machine side would take over and fix the infected arm, where he would respond by punching Deadpool square in the jaw, where they would resume their bloody duel, which even consisted of Cable whacking the guy with a giant plastic Santa. Dude, right after Christmas? Come on, man! Cable would eventually gain the upper hand in the match, where he would go to squash Deadpool's brains in with the Santa. However, Fearless had finally had enough, and unveiled an insane new skill set where she'd blast Nathan with a powerful wave of kinetic energy. This would completely fry Cable's systems, where he'd collapse to the ground, speaking in a mess of binary gibberish. Fearless would then tend to Wade's side, where he'd congratulate her on the power upgrade and noted that she now unlocked telekinesis. Saying that he was in no condition to fight any further, Cable then opened up another portal where he fled back to the future. Fearless would then help the wounded Deadpool to his feet, where he told her that they needed to get to the X-Men immediately. Sensing the sudden urgency in his voice, the woman asked if he was coming. He should heal right up, right? Deadpool knew not all was right. This was way more than just a broken arm. The damage sustained in this fight caused him to use up too much of his life force. This would mean it would only be a matter of time before Undeadpool would return, and he'd be a mindless cannibal hunting for food. Despite knowing this, he would use every precious second he had to keep this girl safe, where he told her to lead the way. Things would then cut back to Cable, where he'd still be seen talking nonsense. Thinking he was going to completely fall apart, Nathan was surprised to see he was actually getting better. In fact, he had even turned back to his former self. We would then be taken to the waters of St. Louis, where we would see an extra roided out looking Miss Marvel brooding on a boat, which was the current headquarters of the X-Men. She was then met by the mutant Fray, forgive me if I botched that pronunciation, where she told her she was running security checks and foresaw a man in red coming their way. Maybe it was Santa Claus because they had been extra good this year. Fray knew better though. This was Deadpool. She would have the teams lock the gates to the X-Men's fortress, and he could rot for what he did to them. After all, the X-Men did not accept traitors. The final issue begins with Fearless waking up in an abandoned restaurant. She calls out for Deadpool. She knows he's there. She believes that the man may be taking advantage of her blindness again and was playing tricks on her. We as the audience see that Deadpool was not up to his usual jokes. He was standing there right in front of the young girl, blade drawn and foaming at the mouth like a wild animal. The X-Virus was taking over once more. Fearless, sensing something was wrong, asked her friend if he was okay. Her voice would somehow reach the recesses of Wade's mind, where he would once more gain control. He'd tell her that he would have loved this place back in the day, back when he was normal. Trying to put her ally at ease, Fearless then tells him that the freezer still worked and some of the food was still good, as long as he didn't mind a little freezer burn. She would mention that there was an assortment of tacos, burritos, and even chimichangas back there, where Deadpool would suddenly get quite serious for once. He'd say that they still had quite a bit of walking to do before they reached the X-Men's headquarters, where he could get her to safety. And besides, he wasn't hungry. Fearless may have been blind, but was quite perceptive when it came to the human mind, and she knew that that was a lie. Deadpool was indeed hungry, but that hunger wasn't for mere tacos, it was for mutant flesh. Finally arriving to the outskirts of St. Louis, Deadpool and Fearless were stopped by the remaining X-Men members, Miss Marvel, Melee, and Bronze. The women then told Wade to get back, where he tried to use his wit and charm to argue his case. Fearless was a mutant just like them, one who managed to escape Revelation's grasp. All of her friends were dead, and she needed somewhere where she can be safe. Somewhere she'd belong. Normally, we would be used to seeing someone like Kamala Khan have such a big heart that she'd let someone like Fearless in without question. However, on this Earth, things would be quite different. Here, Deadpool would come asking them for a favor, but they had not forgotten just how badly he had wronged them. Here we discover that a while back, Wade had told the mutants that he had the power to kill Revelation, but being a mercenary and all, promised he would do it for a small honest man's fee of several $1 million. I mean, man, come on. A couple mil to take out a mad mutant with a reality-altering god complex? I mean, a couple mil sounds pretty reasonable if you ask me. Obviously, we would see that Deadpool was unsuccessful in his mission, as Revelation was still very much alive, and nearly everyone else was either dead or zombified. Wade would apologize for he had contracted the X-Virus and was unable to complete his assignment. That money was not coming back though, as he kinda spent it all on luxury townhouses and bidets. He wanted to make things right though however he could, and begged for them to take Fearless in. Before he could argue any further, Wade's hunger would return with a vengeance. He would turn feral once more, where he'd leap at Miss Marvel and bite her right on the shoulder. This would result in a violent struggle between the X-Men and the infected Deadpool, where they would rush to get Kamala medical attention. Mealy would grab Wade by the throat, where she'd apologize to him before going in for the killing strike. In a brief moment of clarity, he would make her promise him to protect the young Fearless from him. His hunger would return once again, where he'd attack Mealy with his blades. Luckily though, the woman would have intangibility, one of the most useful apocalyptic powers, which would cause Deadpool's attacks to phase right through her. Before things could get any worse, the team would grab Fearless, where they would make their escape back to the X headquarters. Before he could pursue, Wade would hear a familiar sound behind him. It was Cable once more arriving through a portal. Readying his weapon, he would tell the merc that it was good to see him. Rushing Kamala to a medical table, the team would immediately go to stop the blood loss she suffered from Deadpool's bite. As she would hear the heroes go to work, this would cause Fearless to think back once more to her time on the Alpha Warriors. These X-Men were selfless heroes, helping the innocents just like they were. Heroes that Revelation had deemed inflexible. However, as she thought to herself, she was not inflexible. Coming back to Cable and Deadpool, Nathan would call out to Wade, saying that beneath all that gross zombie snarling, his friend was still in there. We find out that when they fought in the last issue, he was overtaken by the techno-organic virus, thus trapping him in a mental time loop where he was stuck on recruiting members to X-Force. He had thought Deadpool was the same cold-hearted mercenary he was when they first met. Little did he know, though, that the virus had caused him to skip over years of friendship between them. Deadpool, too, was now a prisoner in his own mind, and Cable was here to help. His helping, though, was a little more abrasive than normal friendships, where the guy shoots Deadpool right in the kneecaps, sending him to the ground. As the wounded Wade would crawl towards Cable, the man would tell him that for years he had used his telekinesis to keep the techno-organic virus in check. Revelation realized this and then used Nathan's weakness against him. Stomping on Deadpool's arm so hard that it literally severed it, Cable would then reveal that this weakness was the New Mutants, the next generation. He didn't want them to become like him. Something, though, was off. In their last fight in the previous issue, Cable notes how Fearless had hit him with that wave of energy which caused him to retreat. This was not just a telekinetic blast as we thought. Fearless had actually enhanced Cable's powers, so much so to the point that he was cured of the techno-organic virus. During their fight, Deadpool was really getting out of hand. Cable then opened up another body slide field, where he then tossed the man through. Seeing as he had him trapped for the time being, he then tried to explain some sense into him. Since Fearless cured him so easily, she could have done this for Deadpool at any time. Yet instead, she left him out to suffer as he brought her through half of America himself. Just why was that? This was all a show. Fearless was trying out to become one of Revelation's followers, and she wanted him to know it. Everything was playing right into her hands. As Deadpool would force himself through the shield, we would see the flesh begin to immediately tear off his body. Like a mindless wild beast, he would lunge at Cable, biting right into his neck, where he'd savagely tear through his flesh. After the infected Wilson would finish his meal, we would see the mortally wounded Nathan lying in a puddle of his own blood. He would tell his old friend that when they first met, he thought he was just another bloodthirsty mercenary who only cared about money. With his dying breath, he told Wade that this initial reading was wrong. Deadpool had guilt after all. He always survived when others could not. Post-meal clarity would then kick in for our Merc with a Mouth, where his mind would once more return, and he would be horrified at what he was seeing. His old friend Cable, dead at his feet, and he was the one responsible. Cutting back to the X headquarters, we would once more be taken to Fearless, where she would begin to enact her plan. Her powers would activate, sending the others' abilities into overdrive to the point where their bodies would begin to tear themselves apart. She would then phone into Sabretooth and the other evil mutants, where she would upload the footage of this carnage. She wanted Revelation to see that her powers could be of great use, that she was a survivor. In the darkness, Fearless would become fearful, where she would be greeted by a familiar voice. This voice belonging to the battered and bloodied zombie Deadpool. Wielding his sword, the vengeful mercenary would stalk the woman, where he would tell her a story. Back when he was being tested at the Weapon X facility, he and the other test subjects would play a game. This game would be where they would bet on each other's odds on surviving the Weapon X process. As much as playing this Deadpool was sick and morbid, it reminded them all of one very important thing: that life was all one big joke. He tells Fearless that she was in a similar situation. Everyone had bet against her to survive. Heck, as even he was killing her friends, he had bet against her 900 to 1. He was proven wrong though. Fearless had won her Deadpool. As the pair would engage, he would tell the woman that in her fight to win this, she had lost her soul in the process. Did she know how hard it was to fight for that? How hard Cable fought for his? Wade, of course, would gain the upper hand in this duel, where he'd slice Fearless's knees open and would go in for the kill. The panic-stricken woman would then try to stop Wade. She told him that she used her powers to enhance his healing factor. He was now free of the X-Virus, but as of right now, his powers would keep going all the way. Eventually, his body would tear itself apart, and she could stop this before it was too late. All he had to do was get her to Philadelphia, so she could serve Revelation as one of his choristers. We'd then be taken back to the dying X-Men, where suddenly Fearless's spell would be broken. Their powers would go back to normal levels. They were healed. Rushing to see just what happened, they would find the dying Fearless with Deadpool's blade plunged through her heart. In her dying moments, she would think back to her last conversation with the Alpha Warriors, the one about if she could see blackness despite her blindness. It was in her death that she could finally answer that question. She could finally now see the infinite darkness of the void. The X-Men would then make yet another shocking discovery. It was Deadpool, except he was now a fully healed Wade Wilson once more. However, not all was right, as in the very next second, Wilson's flesh would burst into flame. Yes, Fearless had healed him, but now his healing factor had his cancer going faster than ever before. His body was attacking itself on every single level, and it was far too late for him. He makes the women promise him, right the wrong he made, defeat Revelation where he couldn't, and return the world to what the X-Men wanted it to be. As he collapsed into a smoking skeleton, he uttered one final sentence, that there had to be more to life than just surviving. The very last panel would show the charred ashes of the once carefree and lovable mercenary float into the night sky, finally free of the waking nightmare that had plagued him for so long.